Excuse me, Mr. DJ.
Hey, check this out. We got a great show coming your way.
From the ECSI Sports Studios, it's the Midday Market Report with Jeff Dawson.
Good afternoon, sports fans from all around the globe. I am your host, Jeff Dawson, East Coast Sports Investors, and this is your midday market report for Tuesday, August 27th, 2022. 3 days left this month. Way to go. Week 4 NFL. Week 5, I guess you'd call it in college. It's that time of the day where we are blessed and honored to have Ron from Ace Sports on. He gifted us his blood, sweat, and tears for this year's NFL preview and breakdown. And by the time my IT and tech team got it all dollied up and spruced up, it was 98 pages, which is free on our website, which we're going to talk about. So without further ado, let's bring him in from the left coast, which is the best coast, of course, Mr. Ron. How are you, Ron?
I'm great, Jeff. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. You know, we talk about survive and advance, and in our lanes, obviously, we've witnessed 3 weeks of the NFL, and you're here, I'm here, so we must be doing something right, right?
It's been exciting so far. The NFL always produces magical finishes, snatching defeat from the jaws of victory and vice versa. I've enjoyed the last 3 weeks. I put a lot of work in it. Sometimes you get the results that you want, and I couldn't be more pleased. Probably regression coming, but let's put that off a little bit. Let's keep on track. Let's make the golf hole be as long or as wide as it can be so we can sink those putts.
Well, it's funny. Before the show, I got a phone call from my local group that we do weekly college NFL against the spread, and we have a survivor pool. And in week 1, I think there was 19 people in, and 13 got knocked out. I was the only one with the Commanders over Jacksonville. And week 2, I survived. I'm already forgetting who I had in week 2. And this past week, I had the Vikings. So he called up and says, it's you and 2 others. Do you want to do a split and start over? And I'm just like, well, I know all 3 of us will be on the Packers this week. So, this is one of these things that you can prolong and prolong if the schedule sets up right. So I said, hey, $150 in the bush is better than, trying to hold the wheel and, let's move on, right? For the people.
That's nice of you. I think I do 2 offline, and there are 25 people and 40 people, and we're down to about 25 to 30%. I'm not usually a good contest player. I've gotten a little better lately, but I'm one of the people still left. I had Cleveland last week against Pittsburgh in a situational thing. So by Thursday night of last week, I knew whether I was in and out, and I could get on with my life. And I'm still there.
I assume you have the Packers on the mantle ready to roll this week.
I'm not so sure about that. I'll have to look at the schedule. I don't like to try to be on that one. I like to look at some teams that I think are dead and play against them no matter who's there. I like to look at more home teams. I'm looking at the schedule right now. It's pretty bad schedule, huh? So we would have to pick something out that I really, really like. Since I'm in 2, I could split it up. I could go 1 with Green Bay and 1 elsewhere. I'll have to look at it. I'm one of those people, a survivor. I don't look at it till the last minute unless I care about the Thursday game, which is possible.
Well, I want to bring this up to all the viewers here, and let's pull this up here, and I'm going to enlighten this. Anyone watching and listening or watched our timeline late last week, this is Ron's preview, and like I said at the start of the show, he gifted it to us. What we did was we just put some colors. My IT team did, and we got it on our website. So anyone watching and listening right now, if you go to www.eastcoastsportsinvestors.com, you're going to get to our main page, and you pause for 5 seconds, and it will come right up in front of you. That's all you need to do is just to add your email address and download it. And like I said, it comes out to 98 beautiful pages. Every team, every breakdown, every angle. I have thanked Ron a million times, and this is going to be 1,000,001. And I'm not going to stop thanking him till next year when we ask if he wants to put it back up there. But with that said, Ron, give everyone what it's all about. And again, this is something that you do every year. This is your pride and joy, and the platform and stage is yours.
Okay, plenty to say about it, but let me start out first by saying thank you for putting it up and making it so beautiful. I have shared this. This will be the third time that I've shared my season preview in about 30 years. So you can see I have shared it with friends and select people in the handicapping industry, but I've not shared much in the general public. A year ago at this time, I wouldn't be sitting in front of you or being on your show or being on any of my shows. But thanks to Las Vegas Chris and a couple of other people, I've decided to come out and share some of the stuff that I've had as I wind down my own handicapping career. So I've done this for about 30 years. And inside of it, it's not just a preview. It's something that I go back to and I think would still be relevant as you go through. The different categories include roster information. So I'm breaking down the rosters, and people who read this can see, Ron likes this, or Ron pointed out this, or the wide receiver group is better than it has been, or wow, this team actually drafted with a pulse. The Jets and the Giants look better in terms of more complete rosters. I have team keys that are still very relevant. What somebody does with their sack ratio, how's their pass defense performance, what's a new coach like? An example with the roster information that we talked about is how Philadelphia has approached their roster, adding speed at wide receiver, 2 defensive backs that they put in play. They signed in August and September, they signed defensive backs that can start on Philadelphia right away. And, they're in a win now mode. And that's what my preview tried to emphasize with Philadelphia. With the team keys, one of the team keys I talked about was running back Barkley with the New York Giants, now 2 years removed from injury. If he's a factor, if he can do something besides just run the ball, because running backs do not mean that much to me unless they can run, catch, and block. And Barkley has proven that he's back from injury now, and that elevates their roster. When I talk about the season preview, one of the teams that was highlighted this year a lot was Cincinnati. Cincinnati is a damn good team, but they have a lot of schedule ups and downs this year that they haven't faced in the past. They've got that brand new offensive line. So I walk people through the seasonal preview, and I hope you get a taste if you read this in October, if you read this in November, what they're going through and whether or not I'm right or whether or not I missed the boat on that. And then my own personal strategy, which I put out there for good or for bad. You never know how that's gone. It's gone very well in the past. Hopefully it goes very well this year as well. And I have a lot to say about teams, whether to fade them at the beginning, whether I'm looking to play on them as an underdog, whether I'm looking for certain situational spots. It's really about the process. And what I hope people who read this understand is that they can create this kind of thing, not necessarily 60 or 90 pages, but they can create this for themselves, kind of a mindset as to how to go in and a game plan. I don't think people should go in week to week. I like this team. I like this team this week 3. We'll see about week 4. I think they should look at it from a global perspective. And I'm just giving people an opportunity to think about that. Think weeks in advance, and maybe this process will help others moving forward.
So we're 3 weeks in. So I'm going to start with your guide this year, your preview. Just off the top of your head, what you've seen, and then just trying to, in your mind, go back in your work, surprises or something that you thought would be going in one direction that's going in the other.
Well, the not surprises is the number of teams that treated the preseason like the plague. We're not going to dress anybody. We're not going to be ready. You saw that with the Rams. You saw that with a lot of quarterbacks, Russell Wilson, Matt Stafford with the Rams. Yeah, Joe Burrow was off an injury. These teams basically use the first 2 or 3 weeks to get acclimated. And even if you think you're acclimated, look what happened to Buffalo last week going into humidity. So the not so surprising thing was that now that there's 3 weeks into the books, we saw which teams struggled early, and a lot of them were ones that didn't play their quarterback down in the preseason. But now you have to erase all that. At this point, the preseason no longer matters. Everybody should be in game shape. There's injuries that we have to deal with. But one of the things moving forward is what you saw in weeks 1 and 2, take with a grain of salt now. Now just go under the expectation that everybody is up to speed in their conditioning and that we can go from there. I'm not surprised that Chicago hasn't relied on Justin Fields, but he's thrown 45 passes in 3 games. Joe Flacco, of all people, threw something like 60, either last week or one of the other weeks. There are quarterbacks, probably 10 quarterbacks in the league. Oh, maybe even more than that, 15 that have thrown more than 45 passes in a game. And Justin Fields, even coming from behind, has thrown 45 passes at all. I mean, that's just crazy. The coaching analytics world, I've seen Lovie Smith. We'll talk about Houston a little bit later. But I'm disappointed in Lovie Smith, but then I'm not surprised about Lovie Smith in terms of how he's performed. Houston should be playing better than that. I've looked at sack ratios. What would happen with the sack ratios? The Chargers, would they get better because they added, I think it was Khalil Mack, and they did get better in that area. But one thing we could take advantage on the first couple of weeks is that Arizona only had 1 sack the first 2 weeks. And so Matthew Stafford had a clean pocket last week. And the Saints, a little surprising. I'd say the Saints are one of the more surprising teams. They entered week 3 last week with a two sacks for them, 13 sacks against them. I do look at sack ratios a lot. So something's going on in New Orleans that signaled a down team. And a lot of us thought, well, maybe they're a team to contend with, coming into the season. And they're not a team that we can say is a contender based on current play. The body language is really down. So those would probably be the surprises. Not a lot of surprises for me, but probably a lot of surprises. The Giants are 2-0, now 2-1, but their first 2 games were complete toss-up games. Indianapolis is 1-1, but they played like an 0-3 team, to be honest. So those are the things, those are the little takeaways I have right now. And I match them up with what I wrote and see where I'm at. After week 4, I'm going to see exactly where I thought they would be compared to where they're at statistically. And we'll move on from then, and we'll trash the 2021 data, and we'll move into 2022.
One question, you talk about injuries, and I'm going to correlate this to the fantasy football world. Me and my colleagues were very high on a running back due to this running back was coming off of an injury, but due to the circumstances, new head coach, and the opportunities were going to be there. But we got bamboozled because no one told us that James Robinson not only would be ready for week 1, that he would just grab the ball or the bull by the horns and look like Fred Taylor here the first 3 weeks, cutting into our ETN shares and our touches on a game-to-game basis. Shocked that he came back so quick, and more shocked on how good he looks.
Well, let's talk about the Jags for a second. I just went ahead and told you that I trashed the data from 2021 after 4 weeks. but I did something unusual after 2 weeks. I trashed Jacksonville's data after 2 weeks because there's no longer a toxic environment in Jacksonville. Urban Meyer's out of the building. When they shut out the Colts 24-0, it was a completely different team. I think you're going to see Travis Etienne actually carry the ball more and be more of a factor in the pass game moving forward. He was off an injury, like you said. He didn't play all of last year. He's played 2 games in 2 years now. I think his target share got up a little bit. I'm not a fantasy player, but I do delve very heavily in the player prop market. And he was on my radar for last year. I thought his line was priced very low, and maybe a little bit thanks to garbage time, maybe a little bit thanks to the Chargers being in a terrible situation last week. He delivered last week, but I expect a timeshare. I expect pretty much 50-50 depending on circumstance. I expect Travis to get more of the pass catching third down. If he can prove that he can also block on third down. Some of these young running backs have to prove that they're more than just pass catchers. But he was drafted by a different coach, I understand. But he was drafted because of his pass catching ability and his running ability. So I think you'll see him more, but I think you're going to see 50-50.
All right. Before we transition, because we're going to come back to the NFL. We're going to talk about a half dozen teams. We'll get back to, we're sitting at week 4, maybe a couple spots that you might be looking at. You've been on a couple shows of ours. One was earlier this summer, and, you do a lot of work in college as well. Week 5, I said that a lot of people don't count week 0. Georgia, Alabama, Ohio State, and in my eyes, a big gap, a huge gap. Oklahoma loses to Kansas State. I'm a diehard Nebraska fan from the 80s, Dr. Tom Osborne, Irvin Fryer, and I've had to sit in my you-know-what for the last decade. We had that quarterback, Mr. Martinez, who looked like God last week in Oklahoma. Give me where you stand. I mean, I got the gap pretty big. Is the gap that big after Alabama, Georgia, and Ohio State? Or do you say, Jeff, pump the brakes, not so fast?
The gap is big. The gap is 10 points big between the third best team and the fourth best team. Okay. And those 3 teams, you could probably just toss them in a hat right now. I mean, Georgia really elevated itself. I had Georgia about 6 points behind Alabama and Ohio State to start the year. That gap is gone. I was too low on Georgia, and I admit it. Luckily, their spreads were high, and I haven't been involved in their games at all. But you could see right from the start, the guys who did get action on the blowouts last year are just as good, if not better, than the guys from last year. So I don't have a real good feel on a fourth team right now. If I had to pick one out of the blue, I'm watching Utah, but they just lost their tight end he was my 3rd rated tight end coming into the draft of next year behind Georgia's tight end and Notre Dame's tight end. Luckily, Utah has 2 really good tight ends, but this guy he was good for 7-8 catches a game. He could do a lot of things, and it's a big loss for Utah. I know they lost that tough game at Florida to start the year, but that just shows you what the gap is. If I'm thinking Utah might be that 4th best team, maybe it's Michigan. I just don't see a team that can be in the same area code as the top 3 right now.
And we have Julian Edlow on Tuesday mornings from DraftKings, and this summer he was very, very high on Utah. He actually had them as his sleeper, as that Final Four team as well. Let me ask you, and this team has guns a-blazing, and I had them 2 weeks ago against Michigan State. Now they travel, I think, this week on the road. What was your thoughts before the season started and where they are today on Washington?
On Washington, I was borderline excited about them because the last coach talking about toxic atmosphere. That was bad. This coach had a proven record. They had their best defensive player who had a torn Achilles in 2020 not play in 2021. They did not play a road game in 2020. So we knew 2021 was going to be very difficult. At least I did. So I was cautiously optimistic, but I think they've exceeded my expectations. And this will be an interesting game. For a number of reasons, the Washington UCLA game is interesting because UCLA has played the weakest schedule of any Power 5 team that I can think of. And so you're comparing apples to oranges with who they played so far. And my power ratings do not support Washington being favored on the road, but they do support Washington being a better team than UCLA. So it's really going to be interesting how they fare in this particular game. You'll have to refresh me. I know Washington beat Stanford as a double-digit favorite, and that was probably expected, although Stanford has a -10 turnover ratio so far. So really, Stanford has shot themselves in the foot. So I don't think Washington has done anything wrong, but this will be a true test on a Friday night road game.
Yeah, the eye opener was, number, I think, 11th ranked at that point. Michigan State came in. It was basically a pick 'em, and the public pushed it to 3.5. And Washington just blew their doors. Now it's starting to look like that Michigan State team might not be the team that obviously the preseason that everyone thought that they were.
Yeah, I will say this: as good a season that I'm having in college and the NFL. I appear to be dead wrong about Minnesota because I had Michigan State last week as a value play against Minnesota. It was a costly loss for me. Have to admit it. I did not see the Minnesota train coming with having to replace 4 of their offensive linemen, all either drafted or started August on NFL rosters, I believe. Typically, that's a red flag for a team when they lose that kind of offensive line talent. So I've had to reevaluate Minnesota and reevaluate Michigan State in the process. So I just want to put that out that not everything is rosy.
And I'm the same way as you. I've been in these lanes publicly. We're almost starting our 8th year. January 1st, 2023 will be the start of our 8th year. And transparency is what it's all about. I like to say we're the OGs here. Admit when you're right, admit when you're wrong. And we just, as our friend Bill Belichick would say, we're on to Cincinnati.
Yeah, absolutely.
I have to ask you these last 2 questions, and we're going to move back to the NFL. In your power ratings on a neutral field, can you please tell me what the spread would be between Colorado and Georgia Tech?
You didn't prep me with this, and I don't do this for, often, but I saw Georgia Tech was 8-1 to have their coach be fired as the next coach fired. And I said, you know what? It's worth a few bucks. And lo and behold, he's fired. So I'm saying, wow, I just won this 8-1 bet. It's already been credited and everything. Colorado is my next coach to be fired. So if they lose the next 2 weeks and they're double-digit underdog, I believe, to Arizona, and then they have to play Cal. But if they enter the Oregon State game at 0-6, I wouldn't be surprised if that's the next coach gone. And now you're giving me the opportunity to set a line on these 2 teams. I have to reach over and see what my power numbers are on. So let me see where I am on them. I know Colorado number I know offhand. Georgia Tech is pretty bad. I have Georgia Tech favored.
Okay.
On neutral ground. Almost a touchdown, actually.
It's funny, Rob, because, the first couple of weeks, I'm just watching these, and we went, I was in New York City on Labor Day, and I had finished up a fantasy draft. I got back to the room. I watched the Serena match and then the rain delay between Colorado and TCU. And just the speed difference, and it caught my eye. And then we went against Colorado 2 weeks in a row. And then you and I talked about in the summer about Georgia Tech, and I was just watching them. So I think after 2 weeks, I put on my timeline last week, Can we just get it over with? Can Colorado play Georgia Tech so we can see who's the worst? And I'm hats off to you for hitting that 8-1. That is absolutely amazing. The last and you're right. Everyone watching here, I have 510 plus shows on YouTube right now. Not one of them is scripted. No one gets a script here. So Ron, applaud. You're amazing at that. And I'm not trying to throw you any curveballs. I apologize. The last question, they got Alabama at 17. Is that what your numbers say? I think it's a number that wants to attract Arkansas money, and I think they're going to get Arkansas money. Plus, after the tough loss to A&M, I think they will go below 17 before kickoff. I was curious where you had it.
My number is exactly 17. And it pains me to say that because I'm such a KJ Jefferson fan. I think he's underrated as a quarterback. I think he has NFL talent. I didn't see the Arkansas-Alabama game. I was watching some other game. The Arkansas A&M game last week. I wish I had. I wonder why KJ Jefferson only passed the number of times he did. I think it was 20 or so when I was doing the stats. I'm a little disappointed in that. I know he ran effectively. I know A&M's a good defense. But I really like KJ Jefferson. So I was disappointed in where my number fell. But if you look at Alabama defensively this year, it's night and day different so far from last year. And we're on to something here with Alabama if they can hold Arkansas down. My numbers, 4 weeks have gone through, so I trust my 2022 numbers. My numbers say that Alabama would be the side to look at. I think this is such a great game for Arkansas and to see where they are in the process. But basically, my numbers say that Alabama is the real deal. So I'm passing on the game, and it is one that I'm interested in watching. I want to see what KJ Jefferson does against Alabama, because historically, if you play well against Alabama, you have NFL talent. Look at the quarterbacks that have played well against Alabama. And look at where they are in the NFL. It goes all the way back to Tom Brady, believe it or not. But it includes Deshaun Watson, and it includes, I think, one other one of more recent. I can't think of it off the top of my head. But if you play well against Alabama, then you have NFL talent.
All right, let's circle back the wagons here. We got about 15 to 18, 20 minutes, give or take. We're back in the NFL. You had said off air with me that week 4 is the start, or one more week, then you throw away the data. You did obviously throw away the data for the Jacksonville already. You talked about some teams that you wanted to talk about. The Jacksonville, who's a great story already. You talked about the shutout against the Colts, and then they go to LA and the Chargers, and I think they held them to 10 points. Yes, Herbert was banged up, but that's still a great there. Philly, Jalen Hurts looks like a different man out there. He is just so comfortable in the pocket, where it used to be take the snap, first look, don't see him open and run. Looks so comfortable out there. The Saints just were gifted a win in in Atlanta week 1. No offense in week 2. And then again, no offense in week 3, and that was at home against the Bucs. Then they traveled to Carolina. Pittsburgh, be interesting to hear what you have to say about them. Houston has fought their what's off every week, and I think they're 3-0 against the spread. And then, of course, the Buffalo Bills.
Okay, so let me throw a few things out. I'll go brief on Jacksonville and Philly because we covered them a little bit. Give Chris credit for this. Las Vegas Chris, he's the guy who obviously well known in Twitter circles and in handicapping circles, and we shared the Tuesday and Friday podcasts with my friend Ted. He said he was hoping Herbert would play last week because he was going to be less than 100%. And the line went from 7 to 3.5 back to 6.5. And, we were texting, I don't understand this. Why is it going back up? Jacksonville's a better team on this Sunday. I think Jacksonville has a real shot at the division, given the way Indy and Tennessee plays. We did get some comments on some of our podcasts, and people were talking about Jacksonville, and so were we on our season win podcast last Tuesday. Philadelphia, this is one where I still had Dallas ahead of Philly preseason. But Philly was making all the right moves, and Dallas was as passive on the draft and was passive. For the last 8 months, all Dallas has done has be passive, while Philly and their GM, Howie Roseman, has been aggressive. And so Philly has overtaken Dallas in terms of roster and in terms of the way the development of Jalen Hurts. The only caution I have is Philly is yet to still beat a playoff team. And so we have to hold our horses and let's see what Philly does when their schedule gets tougher. Admittingly, their schedule is not going to be that tough this year. With the Saints, we touched upon, without Sean Payton in the building, I really think that they've gone into bad habits. Winston has gone into bad habits again. It was a team that had Sean Payton been the coach entering 2022, I would have picked them to win the division over Tampa, but he wasn't in the building and it's showing. So my comments on Pittsburgh is everybody's down on them. They've done exactly what I thought they would do. They were in a great situation against Cincy to open the season. There were a number of reasons why: the Burrow, the lack of work by Cincinnati, the whole, the new offensive lineman for Cincinnati. Then they played 70 minutes practically in that game. That was a crazy game, the crazy overtime game. So then they have to play against New England, obviously a very strategic game. And then they have the short week against Cleveland on the road. There was no chance that their bodies were going to heal enough to be ready for that Cleveland game. Now they've had 10 days rest. I'm not saying that Pittsburgh's a playoff team, but I'm saying don't be so negative on Pittsburgh. They're going to be a pest all season. They're going to play smart football under Tomlin. Eventually, they're going to get TJ Watt back on the field. Trubisky's had his reps. All I'm saying is hold your horses. If you're negative about Pittsburgh, hold back on that. With Houston, they're 3-0 against the spread. They should be 3-0 straight up, but Lovie Smith and the analytics world should be on him big time as to how bad he's performed. I thought they were better than I expected in the preseason, but I cannot endorse them season win-wise. I'm happy with my season win under total because Lovie Smith is still the coach. I think Houston has a better team than people think. So don't be surprised if they win a few games. Again, they play the Chargers this week, and now the Chargers lost their left tackle for the year. So good situation again for Houston. Let's see how they handle it. And I want to say just a few words about Buffalo. They're still my highest rated team. Nothing changed. That was a very tough game, a very humid game. At one point, Diggs, their great wide receiver, was on the sideline getting oxygen. A lot of players were just gassed in that game with the heat and humidity. They lost to Miami. That's fine. They lost to Miami at Miami. Now they've got another tough week against Baltimore. Even at 2-2, I'm pretty sure they would be my highest power rated team, even after 4 games. They have to get healthy. They played without 5 defensive starters against Miami, still held them down. So I think once they get healthy, once they get their lead defensive back into action, let's not get off the Buffalo bandwagon, even if they lose this week. Those are my impressions of 6 teams right now in the NFL.
You talked about Buffalo and, the 2 of the 3 co-favorites for your MVP obviously will be Josh Allen is traveling to Lamar Jackson, who bet on himself and has just been an absolute freight train. I talked about it earlier today on a show, and he bet on himself, but I can see Baltimore saying, okay, you're doing a hell of a job. It's not like a team can go out and spend $50 million a year on Lamar with a spread offense. In other words, the Ravens have their offense set up for Lamar. You can't just write a check for Lamar and say, okay, Lamar, here's the ball. And if you were the New York Giants, for instance, they're not set up that way. Am I wrong to say there's only a certain number of teams that literally could just pick up the ball and start next year if Lamar did go to free agency and did move on?
Yeah, it would be a structural change. I think you do have something there. And it would be a structural change they would have to make. You don't want Lamar to fit into your system. Lamar is the type of player that you want to fit into his system. So you could pull a Miami off where you get an offensive-minded coach, a really good 3-week sample size for Miami's coaching staff, and they say, look, this is what I've got. I'm going to provide all the weapons that Tua needs. And they still need work on the offensive line. That's a given. But they have the tight ends in play. They have Waddle. They're a speed-based approach. They revamped their run game. They still need to see results from that. That's where you're going to have to move with Lamar. But there's no question in the salary cap era that teams are blessed when a quarterback is on their 4th and 5th year, even their 3rd year, like Joe Burrow, of a rookie contract. That's when you can surround the team with winning talent right away. When those quarterbacks get that second contract, it's actually tougher to win in the NFL because you're going to have to cut corners, so to speak, at other positions. Do you go all offense and no defense like the Colts did with Manning, and not so much with Manning, but with Luck? I mean, they ruined Luck's career by basically getting him battered and bruised. And it's just too bad on that second contract. So they've got Lamar right now. I think they should keep Lamar. I think the issue, as I understand it, is guaranteed contract versus not guaranteed contract. Quarterbacks that run as much as him, what are they going to look like at age 35? Do teams care what they look like at age 35? Because the next contract for Lamar won't take him to 35. It might take him to age 31 or 32. But we haven't seen that. All the quarterbacks that are thriving, the Tom Brady's, the Aaron Rodgers, they all can throw from the pocket. The Drew Brees, when he was at his prime. We haven't seen running quarterbacks thrive at age 35 and beyond that. So Lamar Jackson is taking a chance on history being different.
You talked about if the Bills were to lose, they'd be 2-2, and your power ranking still most likely would have them number 1. I had talked on a show earlier last week with Dave Sharapan and Brady Tinker that I said coming into this week that both Kansas City and the Bucs would be 2-1. Meaning they both would lose last week, and they did. One of those teams, Kansas City and the Bucs, are going to leave the field at 2-2. Now, I know Tom should get, obviously he's going to get Evans back. I don't know how Godwin and some of his other weapons are there. Vegas right now opened it at 3. It's steadily going down to 2. Next move looks like at 1.5. Early thoughts on Chiefs and Bucs, Ron?
Well, these are two interesting teams because Kansas City's the better team. Kansas City left like 13 points on the table against Indianapolis. They chased analytics. They got animated on the sideline. They tried fake field goals. They had a bad field goal kicker because their lead field goal kicker is out. I'm more bullish on Kansas City for the season, but when all is said and done, Tampa will probably have as good a record because Tampa's competition is a lot different than Kansas City's. So it's kind of a weird situation where you say, okay, Kansas City's probably the better team, but Tampa's in the better situation as far as who they get to play. I think they're struggling offensively without Rob Gronkowski. It's something I've said from the minute Chris and I started our off-season shows all the way to now. The red zone is different without Gronk in there. He's a powerful blocker, and he's a red zone magnet for Tom knowing exactly where he's going to be, where he's going to fight for the ball in the red zone, in the end zone. And so I think Tampa's going to leave points on the table. So I can understand the love for Kansas City in this game with the opening line. However, Kansas City itself, they're going to take some chances at times that you're going to say, why did they take that chance? So I think Kansas City is a better team. Right now, I have them pretty much power rated even. But we know Kansas City gets streaky during the year. Under Andy Reid, they get streaky, and they usually get streaky good. I don't have an opinion on the game as such, but but I think I have a feel on both teams. So situationally, I don't mind looking forward to future opponents and having an opinion on them. It's just that in this game, I don't have an opinion.
Couple minutes left. The week 4 boards in front of you, and again, it's Tuesday now with Hurricane Ian traveling through Florida in the next 24 to 48 hours. The Bucks are a team that is evacuated. They're not sure if they can play that game on Sunday. If it was a divisional game, you sometimes can get the flip-flop. All right, we'll go play in your place now, and you come back. But obviously, this isn't going to happen there. Anything early in the week, opening numbers that are moving. As I was doing a show this afternoon prior to us, a lot of the dogs are gaining a lot of money. I see a lot of the favorites, the lines are dropping. Has anything caught your eye early on Tuesday, Ron?
Well, I'm process oriented at this point in the year, at this point in the week as well. So here are some of my thoughts that I'll just brainstorm out there, and people could take it for what they want. Miami, Cincinnati on Thursday night, brainstorming this. It just seems like Miami, I understand the line, which is a little higher than what I made it. But sometimes just because a line is different from what I make doesn't mean that I'm right. It means I need to question the line. And I'm doing that 2 or 3 times. I think Miami is at a situational disadvantage this week, having had some emotional wins and now a short week, and their defense was on the field for 40 minutes. So I understand the feeling that way, and I won't be taking Miami this week because of it. I think the Chargers are at an emotional disadvantage this week because they're getting criticized for leaving Herbert in for the entire game. Now they're without their left tackle. Houston has proven that they can put pressure on the quarterback. That's a nugget that I'm looking at this week. Why is Dallas just 3 against Washington, a very less than public team? I mean, nobody's on the Carson Wentz bandwagon right now. I think we will see this line tick up to 3.5 and 4, but why did it start 3? Do the odds makers know something that we don't know? I think you read inside the lines and you say, wait a second, maybe Dallas isn't the right play on this. I'm just throwing that out. Where are we on 0-3 Vegas? At some point, they're going to beat somebody 40-12. They're going to be so frustrated because they're this close, but they can't seem to finish. And where are we on Russell Wilson? I think half the sacks that he's taken are his fault. Maybe it wasn't Seattle's offensive line. Maybe there was something to Russell Wilson just extending plays a little too long. And the last one I'll say is that, okay, San Francisco loses another player to injury this past week. They lose Trent Williams, their fine left tackle. I'm a little surprised that they're a favorite in this one, but all the situations favor San Francisco. So I'm just kind of thinking out loud with everybody else saying that, San Francisco, I talked about before this week when I said, don't be surprised if San Francisco loses last week, that San Francisco is going to be all right. This is the situation they've been waiting for, the Rams on Monday night. And now they drop another body. So I have to revisit that because I was pretty high on San Francisco before this game, before the results of last week. Those are my stream of consciousness thoughts, if you will.
I'm smiling ear to ear because I can't keep a straight face. You were so spot on that Washington-Dallas number. It's just like, don't forget, the public remembers what they saw last. That Dallas D is just ferocious. They get to come back home. Cooper Rush has actually looked pretty damn good his first 2 starts. CeeDee Lamb, as I'm cursing him, he drops potentially a 55-yard touchdown. Then he comes back with the one-handed one. Yet they only open that up at 3. It's already 3.5. It will be 4 real soon there. And I'm really smiling because I think we've been blessed with the 49ers in this spot against the Rams so many times, and the Rams are favored by 2.5. Here we're getting the home dog, and Shanahan just owns him on primetime at home. And now the 49ers are 2-point favorites. And it's making me wonder, like, because I want to run to the window. I'm just going to play the San Fran money line, and I know they're going to win. It's almost like that Jedi mind trick, Ron. They're like, come on, come get the 49ers. And we're forgetting about the Rams. Where in some power rankings, and most of them, the Rams should be favored.
Yeah, with the injury to the left tackle, I made the game pick 'em. So I have to go out and think about that a little bit more. Actually, I should say, because it's Monday night, and I do give more weight to home field on Monday night. I could go for a San Francisco 1, but I think that left tackle is something I have to consider now, because this was a spot, like you just said, that San Francisco was the right side. Now, they may still be the right side, but I just don't want to. I'm not a big Jeff Wilson fan as the running back. They lose the Trey Lance mobility because Jimmy G stays in the pocket, and now they're going to face the pass rush without their left tackle. I think San Francisco's defense is going to be really good in this situation. I think they're going to have to be really good in this situation.
The one and only Ron at Ace Sports blessing us here on Tuesday. If you didn't get it yet, first of all, if you're not following, please go follow Ron at Ace Sports. Also, go to our website at www.eastcoastsportsinvestors.com and just pause for 5 seconds. His review 2022 NFL guide is available for free. Download it, and then please follow him. Ask him a million questions. We're blessed to have him on Tuesdays when available. Ron, thank you so much.
Thank you for having me. And yes, anytime any of your listeners have any questions, happy to delve into it, any particular game, any particular situation, any process-related question, throw them at me.
And in a few minutes, probably about 15, 20 minutes, the closing bell with myself and Southside Riley at our mags. Otherwise, again, it's been a great 45 minutes. I kept you 2 minutes too late. I apologize there. We will be back soon. Take care.